Good morning. It is 10:13 a.m. on Sunday, September 20th, 2020. I'm Christiana Ellis, and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. So, I actually talked about this yesterday, but let me reiterate for anyone who didn't watch that yesterday. Because today is Sunday, which is when I do my recaps of my rewatch of The Legend of Korra. And I talked about that yesterday for this reason. So, Friday night, there was really bad news about Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg dying. And I'm not going to get into all of the ins and outs of that, except to just say I was really bummed about it. And when I got up Saturday morning, that's kind of what was on my mind, but I didn't really feel like talking about it in that state of mind, and so I decided before recording the 5 More Minutes video to watch the next episode of Legend of Korra. But the next episode of Legend of Korra, per my normal sequence, is Season 2, Episode 13, Darkness Falls. And by the end of that episode, it seems all is lost. Our hero is in despair, and the villain is promising 10,000 years of darkness. And so, that wasn't a great place to leave it for my mindset. So I decided to go ahead and watch the finale of Season 2 as well, Light in the Dark, where things get turned back around. And it felt a lot better. And so on that basis, I'm going to go ahead and talk about both of those episodes today. And go ahead and wrap up Season 2 with this video. So, it's just as well to talk about these two back-to-back anyway, because they're definitely part 1 and 2 of a two-parter. And also, there's a lot of fighting in it, so which is cool, but also doesn't necessarily take as long to talk about. So it's just as well to go ahead and do these two together, I think. So let's talk about these episodes. We'll start with Darkness Falls. And what we have in this episode, once again, is we have a couple of different, parallel plot lines with the different characters going on, right? We have, Korra dealing with, fighting Vaatu, this dark spirit in the spirit world. We have Bolin and Mako trying to hold off Unalaq. And then we have Tenzin, Bumi, and Kaya looking for Jinora in the spirit world, right? Let's start with that last one first. We have them looking, in the spirit world, but they find pretty right away that it's just like they don't know how to find someone who's lost in the spirit world. None of them have enough experience with the spirit world to know what to do, right? There's lots of suggestions being thrown out, but they all seem relatively useless. Bumi says we'll try to follow footprints. But Kaya points out, would you even recognize Kaya's spirit's footprints in the spirit world if you even saw them? And then, of course, she tries to meditate and says she senses spiritual energy over there. That must be her, except it's pointed out, we're in the spirit world, it's all spiritual energy. And so they're just kind of struggling. And then when Tenzin tries to suggest something, he suggests they find a guide. And the initial guide they find, there's a kind of a fun reveal that he sees this fun little glowing star thing that turns out to be a little bit like the lure of an anglerfish, and it's actually this weird dark spider spirit thing who chases them away, but sets things up for later by basically chasing after them, saying there's only one place that humans in the spirit world belong. So they're having trouble looking around. They're lost. They escaped from the dark spider for now. Then they are just kind of wandering. And there is a fantastic gag of they're going in circles. Tenzin says, we've passed that same spirit mushroom 5 times already. And Bumi says, it's not the same spirit mushroom. And then the spirit mushroom goes, yes, I am. In this silly voice. And I don't know, it makes me laugh every time I see it. And every time I think about it, it's just such a good bit. Yeah, just, I don't know, I'm just laughing about it again, thinking about it just now. But then, of course, they encounter Iroh again, who basically hears they were lost, checks in with them, and offers to help them find a way out. But when they say they're not going to leave without Jinora, he basically says, "I can't help you there," except that he kind of, sort of can, in the sense that he says cryptically this idea of, if you're not careful, you'll end up somewhere where only the lost will ever find you. And that's what, connects the dot in Tenzin's mind to there's a prison for humans in the spirit world where the fog of lost souls, which itself is a spirit, imprisons humans within their own darkest memories. And so thinks that is probably where Jinora's spirit would have been sent. And so they need to go there too. So they figure, because of what the Dark Spider spirit said, maybe he would take them there if they get captured. So it's kind of funny that they go back to this scary spirit that they fled from before and basically just provoke him so that he'll take them to the prison. But then, of course, we get them in the prison, and there's a nice setup for before they actually go crazy. It's a fun callback that Admiral Zhao from the first series is there. If it's been a while since you saw the last Airbender series, Admiral Zhao was last seen at the siege of the North Pole, where he had killed the moon spirit, with this idea that it was going to depower the waterbenders, and was right, such as it is, but that set off such a powerful imbalance between the moon and the ocean, which were supposed to be sort of paired with each other, that it was causing all sorts of havoc. And so eventually, that was all stopped by Sokka's girlfriend, the princess, becoming the new moon spirit, essentially, which is why that fabulously meme-worthy conversation that happens later in that series, of my girlfriend became the moon, and Zuko saying, "That's rough, buddy." Anyway. But we last saw Zhao at that point being taken away by the ocean spirit, basically. Like, we'll take care of you. And then we last saw him. And so apparently he ends up here wandering around in kind of a angry, manic state of, like, I'm Zhao the Conqueror, the Moonslayer, and I'm going to capture the Avatar. And just in this agitated state that he can't ever recover from, because there's nowhere to go for him. And so it's interesting that he briefly mistakes Tenzin for Aang, especially since that sets up what happens for Tenzin and Aang in a little bit. But they get away from Zhao, but soon Bumi and Kaya start to fall prey to these dark memories of and Bumi's is kind of straightforward and a little bit silly, that he just remembers being surrounded by cannibals, and so he's got to get out of there. Kaya's is a little bit more nuanced, because she essentially flees from the others by saying, "I have no family, you can't tie me down," which is interesting, just because I guess we don't really know very much about what her life was before, right? Like, Bumi, we know, was in the military kind of for a long time and went on all these adventures. But what did Kaya really do? I guess she traveled around, and so she kind of liked that, and maybe there's an element to which staying and, trying to stick around for her family feels a little bit like an unwelcome disruption in her MO. I don't know. In any case, Tenzin can't keep them with him. He's trying to airbend the fog away, but it's just futile because it's all over. But then, as he is struggling to ward off these, his own dark memories, which start to intrude, telling him that he'll never measure up to his father, he'll never be Aang, and he's starting to have that imposter syndrome feeling. And we recall the whole business of, like, he's supposed to, like, one of the first things they hear about, from in season one is that Tenzin's supposed to be Mr. Spiritual, right? Except that, we had the reveal that he never got to go to the spirit world, and he's just feeling like not only did he not live up to his father, but he can't even do all of these other things that he's supposed to be the best at. And we can see him starting to go into there. But ultimately, he has the epiphany, speaking to an image of his dad, of Aang, as an adult, that he shouldn't try to be Aang. He shouldn't measure himself against Aang, because he's not Aang. He should be Tenzin. So instead of being, thinking of himself as a failed Aang, he should think of himself as the best Tenzin he can be. And ultimately, even though I feel like it could have been dramatized a little better, I do feel like it's cool that ultimately, Tenzin saves the day indirectly, because, for everything, because ultimately his epiphany is able to, leaves him able to temporarily drive back the fog so that he can find not only Jinora, but Kya and Bumi as well, and lead all of them out of the prison before it resumes. And because he's able to do that, of course, that frees up Jinora, who is able to help Korra later. And it's, so he's successful by essentially being able to confront this memory, this darkest memory, this darkest fear of not measuring up to his dad. He's able to essentially face it, and through just his force of personality and his determination, he is able to look that fear in the eye, not flee from it, and turn it, instead of a dark fear, into, a positive affirmation of his own. And good for him. So he gets Kya, Bumi, and Jinora out, but Jinora senses that things are not going well for Korra, and so she says, I can't go with you yet. I have to help Korra. And that's where we leave them in this episode. Meanwhile, towards the beginning of the episode, where Korra is fighting, Vaatu has escaped. Unalaq is right there, but Korra kind of manages to do some bending on Unalaq to fling him back into the material world, which I absolutely just love that bit of animation that she just essentially whips him right into this, she just throws him like a tennis ball right back through the portal, and it's a fun little bit of animation. But in any case, so she's going to fight Vaatu, and she tasks Mako and Bolin, keep him from coming back into the spirit world. And so we follow them for a while, and we're cutting back and forth between all these stories throughout, of course. And, there's not a lot to their story for a while, because it's mostly just them trying to hold off Unalaq, discussing how, if they can just stall him long enough, they don't have to subdue him, they just have to keep him from going through the portal in time. Unfortunately, he's already strong enough that, he's kind of a match for the two of them already. They're only just barely holding him off, but then Esna and Deska show up, and the three waterbenders together are easily able to take down Mako and Bolin, and so they, capture them. And but that's when we have, Unalaq is able to go back through the portal at that point. And Mako and Bolin are captured by Esna and Deska. And there's a little bit more pleading with them to try to just, convince them to stop helping Unalaq. And it's not going well until Bolin just starts to sob. And he does this big performative thing about, oh, Eska, I actually really did love you. I'm so sorry that we weren't able to make it work, and now the world's going to end, and we never had a chance. And ultimately, this endears him to her enough that she you know, that combined with the doubts that she and Deska were already having, namely that Unalaq doesn't actually seem to care about them very much, uh, they do decide to let Bolin and Mako go free. And so Mako and Bolin run to try to, you know, stop Unalaq at the last minute, although we see later that they're too late. Um, and there's a moment where Mako is like, great job, Bolin, you're acting, you know, saved the day. And Bolin kind of wipes the tears away and says, yeah, acting. And I thought that was really interesting, and I want to interrogate that a little bit because there's some interesting, like, ethical quandaries in discussing some of what that was all about. Because on the one hand, we could say that in any kind of a normal circumstance, if if someone was in love with you and you hurt them, pretending that you actually do still love them in order to manipulate them to do what you want is a very crappy thing to do, right? But on the other hand, also, this is a matter of they're doing anything desperately they can think of in order to save the world. So I think in that context, you could sort of you could forgive a little bit of emotional manipulation on that basis. But it's also it's one thing to say, well, when you weigh the stakes of the two things, it's another thing to say, well, but do we want our good guy character to do something like that? But with the reveal that it's not entirely acting, it's not just a trick. It sort of turns it again of like, maybe he even started saying it as like a lie, a manipulation, and then just sort of realized how much he actually felt it. But then it's also a fair question to ask, is it possible that Bolin's practice acting made him better able to sincerely communicate his emotions, which is kind of interesting and fun to think about a little bit. So we don't get the second payoff for that, but there is, like that happens in the next episode, which we'll come to. But in any event, they run after Unalaq, but they are too late. And so let's now, with Korra and Unalaq, most of their screen time is just them fighting. It's Korra fighting Unalaq, it's Korra fighting Vaatu, and then it's Korra fighting the two of them, and then it's Korra fighting Dark Avatar, Unalaq, Vaatu, Unavaatu, Vatulak. So we start, obviously she flings Unalaq away. She's fighting Vaatu, and although it's a tough fight, eventually by going into the Avatar state, she's able to subdue Vaatu, and she's working on putting him back into the tree. And all of that, fits with everything that we had understood so far, which is that the whole thing was Vaatu and Rava were so evenly matched that they couldn't, defeat the other. But then when Rava fused with Wan, that made them together more powerful and able to imprison Vaatu in the first place. And so now that's about to happen again, but unfortunately this is when Unalaq has managed to get past Bolin and Mako and stops Korra from imprisoning Vaatu again, and then Vaatu and Unalaq fuse permanently, and he becomes the Dark Avatar, which is kind of an interesting idea, especially just given the mythology that they've built now for like what is the Avatar and how does that work. It perfectly makes sense that like if the Avatar is a spirit fused with a human, and that spirit has a mirror image opposite, then it makes sense that mirror image opposite could also make, an avatar of its own. Although some of the rules of that are a little bit wibbly, because, it's not important really, but it does raise questions that you think about afterwards. But in any event, there's a couple of ebbs and flows of the following fight where, briefly, Unalaq and Vaatu will get the better of Korra, and then she'll kind of rally and then fight back some more. But eventually, despite, the ins and outs of the fight, eventually Unalaq is able to, with Vaatu's help, extract Raava from Korra and apparently destroy Raava, annihilating the spirit altogether. And we watch in horror while that happens that as Raava is being lashed against this rock, we see Korra's connection to her past lives evaporate. And that's this horrific feeling of being severed from this connection she had, even though technically we didn't really ever see her do very much with those connections, right? It was not a big part of her Avatar experience really, but still the loss of that possibility seems dire. And if we finish the episode with it feeling like she's been stripped of what made her the Avatar, that kind of like she's not actually the Avatar anymore, and now the Dark Avatar is victorious. He's promising 10,000 years of darkness, and she turns into a gigantic dark spirit and then flies away. And it seems like everything's real bad. So instead of leaving it there, we continue on to the next episode, which is Light in the Dark. And in Light in the Dark, we begin with some stuff in Republic City where, if we recall back several episodes now, the rationale that President Raiko gave Korra for not sending his troops to the southern pole, the South Pole, was, if you're right and Unalaq's going to do something huge and disastrous, then I need the troops here to protect Republic City. But then, when the Dark Avatar arrives, Unavaatu shows up as this gigantic spirit that's able to just whoosh away entire battleships. It shows kind of the folly of that whole line of thinking, which is to just say, yeah, good job. I'm so glad that they were there instead of where they could have made a difference. But yeah, okay. But at the same time, we can, from his perspective, we can see where he was coming from. But in any event, we see Unavaatu there, kind of a little petty as he decides to pull down the statue of Aang. Sorry, my dog is making dreamy, whimpery noises behind me. And so he's obviously just wreaking a lot of terror there. And I think it's funny. So there's wreaking havoc, and then there's terror. And then there's also the character Varrick. And so I think that's where I kind of was combining those three things. Because as he's causing all this damage, making all these vines grow all over the city, we see Varrick, dodge out of the way as vines crack a hole in his prison cell, at which point he is able to commence Operation Winged Freedom, and he and Julie have a glider pack prepared, and they escape. And they just continue to be enormous fun. Varrick and Julie are great, and they continue to be great for the remainder of the series. Spoiler. In any case, that happens, but then we come back to Tenzin, Kaya, and Bumi have, found... they're trying to head back to the portal. They find Korra, Mako, and Bolin there. They're unconscious. They have to be, healed in some water. Kaya helps out there. And then everyone catches each other up, right? And so this is where Korra is, like I said, she's just in despair. She feels like she's lost everything. She failed. And now it's not even just about her failing. It's about, the stakes were so high. And everything's ruined now. The world is, it's ending the world as they know it. And, but this is, with a little prompting from Kaya, Tenzin realizes, this is where Korra really needs help. She needs someone to help her realize that all is not lost. And so he takes her to the Tree of Time, which has some sort of time memory magic, which again doesn't have to make a lot of sense really. It's just, it's supposed to make emotional sense, right? She is, in shock from losing this connection to the Avatar, but losing the connection to Rava, which made her the Avatar. But here's where Tenzin is basically pointing out, like, the story you learned about Wan is that Wan was not ordinary before he became the Avatar. He ended up the Avatar because he was the sort of person who could make that sort of thing happen, right? He persuaded Rava to help him. He was powerful enough to intervene in that fight to begin with, and then to work with Rava to, learn all of these different elements and do the confrontation and then become the first Avatar. Like, that was something that he was able to do because of who he was, and because he didn't become the Avatar until after he made all that happen. And so in that basis, Tenzin helping Korra to see that, bending is not just about manipulating the elements outside of herself, but the energy within herself, which dovetails with advice that Aang was given back in the episode with the Guru in the first series, where it's a recognition of, this, what bending really is and how it works, and being able to tap into that. And Korra, being at this locus of spiritual energy and having this power within herself, is able to astrally project her spirit form into this enormous blue Korra, which goes off to fight Unavatu and in a big kaiju battle in the Republic City Bay. And it's all, when I use the word silly, I don't mean to imply that it's like trivial or fluff, but it's just so heightened, and so it's this big fight, and there's a lot of stuff going on there. There's back and forth, again, rise and fall in that fight. First Korra's doing better, then Unavatu's doing better, and so on, until what we see is, and we remember from the tree, is that the promise between Rava and Vatu was that if either of them ever destroyed the other, it wasn't permanent. There would be, the other would be reborn from within the victorious one. And so on that basis, Korra is looking for the seed of Rava deep within Vatu, and initially can't find it until Jinora shows up with a glowy ball of light energy, apparently, because it's like, what? It's unclear what that is, and they admit in the commentary that they didn't really decide what it was. They kind of just said, yeah, I guess that's going to make a sort of intuitive sense without having to really explain the details. And they're not wrong, but I think anyone who wants to know the details is like, there's not really any to be found there. Like, people could have theories, but the writers pretty much confirmed that they didn't have a specific idea in mind when they did it. So, but in any event, Jinora helps save the day, and what that means is that we had this this big team effort of, obviously Korra was instrumental in this whole thing, but also without Jinora's help at the last minute, she couldn't have found Rava again. Without, and for Jinora, without, Tenzin helping her escape from the, the fog, she couldn't have helped. And it's just all this chain of everybody helping each other. And so, during all this fight, we had everyone else, including Desna and Eska, fighting off the dark spirits, trying to protect Korra's body, since she's just astrally projecting. But eventually she's able to defeat and then subdue Unavatu, and we see her use that spirit bending thing to, visually at least, seems to turn the dark energy into light energy and then dissipate. And what happens exactly to the Dark Avatar is unclear, because of course what happens with the regular Avatar is that like even when Wan died, they were reincarnated. So would the Dark Avatar be reincarnated? Unclear. They really don't explain it, but it's certainly dealt with for now, at least. And and then Korra returns and then uses the last moments of the harmonic convergence to re-merge with Rava, once again becoming the Avatar. It's interesting, though, that they establish that even though she is now the Avatar again, it does not restore the lost connections. The chain was broken, and now a new chain is reforged, but with the last link of the previous chain, but it does not have connection to the previous links anymore. Which is interesting. I think that was controversial. A lot of people really didn't like that, but I kind of like that there's stakes. One of the things that I like about this finale actually a lot is that they weren't afraid to let this actually change the world, right? That they weren't trying to reset everything to status quo. I think that it's important because so often superhero type stories can be very reactive about, some bad guys trying to wreck everybody's good time. And so the hero is just saying, no, I'm going to stop you so that I can return everything to how it was. And so having big changes come about, and in particular, so not only is that chain broken, and so that's a real loss. There were stakes. There was a loss. It wasn't a perfect victory. But also then, in the last moment when Korra is about to close those portals again, she hesitates, and she just feels like, obviously Unalaq had some really bad ideas, and he was just power hungry and desperate, and so he, had to be stopped. But some of what he said wasn't wrong about this idea of, why should the spirits and the material world be separate? Why? Maybe Wan made a mistake in separating them. Maybe that was not the right solution to the conflicts that were there. And so she was willing to say, let's let those portals stay open. That is a big decision about the nature of the world, and I like that the hero is willing to make the decision that changes the status quo, because the path of least resistance for her certainly would be to say, well, most people, if I asked most of the people of the rest of the world, they would want me to put it back the way it was. But I'm the one that gets to make the decision. I'm the one that's here right now, able to make this decision. So it falls to me to do what I think is right. And my instincts are telling me to not close them. And Tenzin is there. And to his credit, he initially assumes that she's just going to repeat the pattern, and restore things. But then when she hesitates, he tells her to trust her instincts. And so they decide they're going to leave the spirit portals open, which means humans can go into the spirit world whenever they want, and spirits can come and go into the material world. And that's going to be a big change to the state of the world. And I really admire this finale for making that call. And it's actually something that was really influential to me on my So Many Levels campaign, honestly. Being unafraid to let the decisions the heroes make actually produce permanent major changes in the world, and not just have them constantly trying to restore the status quo. I like that a lot. But then, of course, we also have, some of the other stuff be a little bit more rudimentary. We have Jinora wakes up back in her own body, thankfully, okay. And the animation there of just her obviously very weak, but having a smile and just looking up to Katara and Asami and Korra's parents and just being able to say, Korra saved the world. It's very sweet. I'm tearing up even just thinking about it a little bit. There's several things in this one that I kind of tear up a little bit. Korra decides that she, announces her intention with the spirit portals and saying, so everyone, attention, there's probably going to be a lot of people who are going to question this decision, but here's what I decided, and I'm the one that gets to make that decision because nobody else can do it. And so I think that's kind of interesting. And then she declares, okay, the Southern Water Tribe's going to be independent. Sure, why not? I don't think they ever really sold to us that the Northern Water Tribe was anything was represented by anyone but Unalaq. So now that he's gone, do we even really care about the Northern Water Tribe? I don't know if we do so much. But anyway, we also get some closure on some other emotional loops, like confirmation from Bolin that he wasn't entirely acting, because he basically goes up to Esna and admits and is like, okay, so how are we doing this? I mean, you could absolutely come to Republic City with me, and you can even bring your brother, that whole sort of thing. But then she basically shuts him down and says, no, we're not going to do that. Now that our father's gone, we have to go back to the Northern Water Tribe, and frankly, you're not invited. We have a lot to do. But that you'll always hold a special place in the organ that pumps my blood. It's pretty good. And so that's, I think we have the slightly comic version of that same dynamic there, but then a more serious take with Mako and Korra. And even though we had to deal with the silliness of her conveniently having forgotten just that one specific memory of their breakup, we come back around to the same spot here where she reveals that she does remember now. Kudos to Mako, who finally does get up the courage to tell her, even though it turns out that she now remembers. And they have the discussion of saying they both do very much care about each other, but they just really realized that, when they were trying to be romantic partners, it just didn't work. They just fought all the time, and it was, not workable. And so they have a very bittersweet, caring, mature breakup that I thought really works well. But then the thing that made me tear up again a little bit is when Korra walks out and Mako's standing there looking a little bit empty, and then Bolin shows up and there's a big hug because they love each other. They're brothers. And then it's like, aw. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we leave, book 2 of The Legend of Korra. So, feels a little better, understanding that the forces of darkness can produce permanent changes in the world, but that we can't give in to despair. We keep fighting, and to accept that maybe the world not only can be saved from 10,000 years of darkness, but maybe it can even be better than it was before, and not just restored to what it was before the latest wave of evil. So, next week we will talk about Book 3, Change, Episode 1, A Breath of Fresh Air. In the meantime, I'll talk to you all tomorrow for 5 more minutes.